So welcome everyone who's joining us today. I want to say thank you for taking your time out of your day to come and sit with Adam and I. Joining me today is Adam Mills, broker of record with Royal LePage. He's a good friend of mine, and we've done quite a few webinars, seminars together on different topics. Pardon me?
And podcasts too.
Podcasts, yes, we've done podcasts together too. So I've always appreciated, Adam, the fact that you're willing to take something on head on, regardless, and even if you don't know how to do something, you'll do it and try it. And so I'm kind of the same way. So it's worked out well for both of us, putting content out there for people. I know you and I did, Adam. You and I did this a similar presentation on this last year. And it was a smaller, shorter podcast or video podcast that was about 30 minutes long. So this one's a little bit more in depth for the individuals who are joining us today. Big topic though, we've heard a lot in the last 12 months on real estate. You can probably throw in here, Adam, about how you feel about what's going on with the real estate market, but lots of people thinking now what to do with their houses, right? So right sizing is more of, about getting the right property for you and downsizing to something that you can enjoy and maybe not have excess of, right? So any comments on the markets?
Like one of the biggest waves generationally is the boomer wave, and that wave right now is typically sitting in large homes with lots of equity, and they're all looking at each other saying, okay, well, what's next? What am I doing? Am I going to stay in this home, continue to maintain it? Am I going to maybe right size, or if you want to call it downsize, into something new? Will that fuel my retirement? There's a lot of conversations about that on what's the right move for that individual. So I would say almost half the clients that we're working with now that we're speaking to are looking at this lifestyle switch that involves the the right sizing process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's so many complex moving pieces to it. I think it's important for people to think through it or have a plan to work through it before they start making any big decisions like this. So on that note, we'll get going. And we'll start off. We're the speakers. I'm Darren and Adam. I'm a financial advisor with O'Farrell Wealth and Estate Planning and Asante Capital Management. Been at this for 15, 17 years. I've lost count, but it's been a while, and I still love what I do. So always something new in this industry, always different ideas, client situations that I've worked through. And like I joke with Cole in our building here that I started off saying I was going to retire in 10 years. I'll probably, I said 5 years, but now it looks like I'll probably end up 10 years. I just love what I do. So Adam, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Adam Mills. I run a real estate brokerage and a real estate team with Royal LePage. Our office that we're based out of is in Mantic presently, but we do operate around the whole city. And yeah, as a team, I mean, one of our biggest goals is to make sure that we really dive deep with clients, understand what their needs and wants are, and then from there try and help them, not for short-term, 6 months, a year type goals, but let's look long-term and make sure wherever we're putting people is going to really suit them for the long term and achieve their goals at the end of the day. That's the most important thing. So that's really our core focus.
I agree. I think what I like most about both of our situations is we work with teams. So O'Farrell Financial has a team of 40, and you have a team of how many working with you?
Not quite 40. We're a little shy of that, but there's 6 of us right now.
That's a good team. That's a great team. All right, let's dig in here and start with the agenda. So the agenda is, first we're going to describe what downsizing is and what causes it. Talk a little bit about retirement planning, as it is one of the bigger reasons why people right size or downsize. We're going to speak a little bit about the taxability of downsizing, if there is any, and what you should be aware of. We will talk a little bit about estate planning and executor planning and what you should know. We'll talk about the benefits and challenges associated with downsizing, the buying process, and we'll take it from there, and then the renting versus buying and what the benefits and challenges are for those. And then we'll wrap it up with some questions. So as I was mentioning at the beginning of the presentation, definition for right sizing is really just downsizing. You're going from a larger square footage area typically to a smaller square footage area, and hoping to capitalize on any equity in that property as you do that. We like to say that, if you're gonna, for most of the people that I work with, as you get older and the people move out of your home, you require less space because you have less bodies in the building. So, this comes up quite frequently when people are retiring. So
the two things I find that, this holds true from almost anything in life. The two most important things for most people are time and money. And doing this downsizing process, really what you're trying to do is recapture both. You're trying to recapture money that's stuck in your house and recapture time, which is spent maintaining a house likely that's bigger than what your needs are, right? Mm-hmm. So you're basically saving both, which I think is, there's not many things out there that you can, check off both those boxes with one move.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So I mean, one of the questions a lot of people ask, I think people get a mindset of why even bother? Let's just, this is working, and I can afford it, so why even make any changes? So let's look at why you should even consider it. Like you just said, Adam, about equity and increased cash flow. Obviously, you downsize, you free up some equity, you have more cash flow because you have less expenses on a bigger property. So financial freedom's a big one, right? Reduced consumption, less space to fill. Again, I don't know about you, Adam, but after I keep going up in houses, and like I've moved to 3, and I swear to God, I'm at the house now where I keep purging, but I keep filling it up, and I don't know why that keeps happening. I don't know if it's like a problem, in life. As you acquire more children and whatnot, you acquire more stuff.
It's like the fish in the fishbowl thing, right? You grow to the size of your environment. So you give yourself a bigger box to fill. I mean, time's gonna fill that box for you.
Yeah, it does, and it really does. So one of the benefits, obviously, the downsizing is the less upkeep. So there's less to think about, less property to maintain, snow blowing, lawn maintenance. All these things are going to be reduced as you reduce the size of the space that you're living in, right? Free up time, that was the big one that you just brought up, Adam, and so true. I like to joke that around here that I love giving all the investment advice based on our wealth department, because they're the experts in that, and I let them make the big decisions. I'd rather be driving my tractor cutting my lawn, but at some point I'm probably not going to want to cut my lawn either. So that's freeing up my time not being on the tractor if I'm not living in that house. So all right, so let's look at the big triggers. Now, so this might surprise some of you. You'll probably have an aha moment and say, oh yeah, that's true. Retirement, what are the big common triggers? So the biggie is usually retirement. That's the one we all think about because, the kids are gone, they're going to school, and now, or they're out of the house completely, and mom and dad are sitting in this house, and big house, it was accommodating 5 people, now it's accommodating 2. So now they're thinking retirement planning. Do we need this much space? Should we be thinking about a smaller home? So that's usually the first trigger. Another trigger is divorce. We're not going to talk about that today, but it is a big percentage of downsizing. 2 partners separating everything and equalizing their assets, and obviously one partner doesn't need as big of a property, or maybe it's an affordability thing. They're trying to get into a property that's reasonably priced that they can afford. Divorce is another reason why people downsize.
Yeah, and then I'd say on the divorce one, to touch really quick, I mean, that usually is a different age bracket, obviously, than the retirement age bracket. It's usually younger families. Typically, they'll run into some kind of a marital issue, and then that does at a younger age force people into more of a downsizing mode. And again, it's purely, as you said, it's purely from an affordability perspective.
Affordability, yeah. And you know what? Speaking of which, Adam, we have been seeing a lot of change. So the divorce market has increased into the gray divorce now, which is a different podcast and webinar that we've done in the past about gray divorce. So look forward to that in 2024. We're going to be doing another podcast on that eventually. The next one is estate planning. So obviously, we've got individuals who are getting close to that 80 plus age who are now considering, that managing a house is too much, or maybe they're just trying to line up their ducks efficiently so that they can minimize taxation, and they're just looking at their estate and how does that house play into it, especially when it's one of the biggest assets they have. We'll touch on that today a little bit on the estate planning side, but really this is almost its own webinar. So, but happy to take some questions on that. Okay, so we're going to get into retirement planning 101. I always say when you're sitting in a dark room, it's hard to hit a dartboard with the lights off. So where I always start on the basics with clients is I say, you have to understand what you need to live on. What's coming in and going out of your account? What is, what is the variable expenses you have? What are the fixed expenses you have that you can't change? And then how do they come together to form your cash flow analysis? Now, I know everybody loves the word budget. I know they don't. But a cash flow analysis is really what you need to do prior to going into retirement, because you have to understand what do you need to survive, and then what's the fund money, and how long do you want to do that fund money? Because now if you put in a $10,000 travel expense budget, are you going to do that till you're 90? Probably not. So understanding how long you're going to need that excess cash flow and when it's going to turn off, and then what you need to survive are two different things, right?
So Darren, that would mean, like, if you're looking at, so say someone retires at, I don't know, 55, 60, their cash analysis, it would diminish as they get older, because I guess the fund money stuff, if you're planning on, traveling 3 months of the year, by the time you hit 75, 80, 85, whatever, I mean, that's probably not in the cards. But when you're, in your like early 60s, that would more than likely be the time you're doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We always see like there's more expenses at the front end of retirement than the tail end. But at the same time, sometimes clients, will say, I'm not traveling anymore, but maybe I want to give some money to family. Maybe I want to, help another generation buy a house or something. So there's still possible expenses, but it's always good to understand, what is your meltdown strategy or your cash flow strategy to get you to 90. And whenever I say 90, a lot of people kind of chuckle about that. Truth is, the average female is living to age 87 now, and the average male is living to 84. So, there's a high probability that if there's a couple, that one of them is going to live to 90. That's why we always cash flow plan right to 90, so people know that they can make it, right? So speaking of making it to 90, one of the big questions people have to ask themselves is, where are the buckets going to come? Where is the funds going to come from to create this cash flow? When you're looking at retirement income sources, there's typically three major buckets. The first one is right here is the government. CPP and OAS is a big one. Everyone thinks about that. Canada Pension, you contribute to it, your employer contributes to it, it builds up over time, and then they give you, they give you your best years. And then it's an average of that, and then it maxes out, right? So usually once it maxes out, very few people get 100% of it. The best thing to do is actually contact CRA or CPP and ask them what your entitlement will be. They'll actually give you an analysis based on your contributions, what you can expect at 60, 62, 65, whatever years you tell them. That's a great way to start planning what you're going to get from the government. The OAS typically is a bucket that everybody gets if you lived in Canada for 40 years. One thing to be aware of, though, is if you are earning more than $80,000 a year, the government can look at you and say, well, you're making too much money. You don't really need that OAS, and they can proactively start clawing it back and eliminate it once you hit about $140,000. That's where income splitting with retirees becomes a very big question. I recommend you talk to your accountant about that, but that's also a conversation. You want to income split, bring your income levels down to make sure that you retain that OAS. The next bucket we look at usually is your personal bucket, and that's the RSPs, TFSAs, and non-registered accounts. Everybody knows RSPs. We do another webinar and seminar on RSPs and TFSAs and non-registered, so you understand what those are. But typically they're personal investments. You put money in, you get a tax break, you take it out when you retire and turn it into a RIF. TFSAs, after-tax money, you put it in, you invest it, you get a return. It's not taxable as it grows. And then non-registered accounts typically are those buckets where you can't fit them into those 2 registered accounts. You got another bucket which is not protected from taxation. You're pretty much paying taxes as it grows. The last bucket we look at is usually the corporate side. That is, if you're employed by an employer and they have a pension plan, is understanding what type it is. That's a huge conversation to have. Is it a defined contribution where you put certain amount of money in, like a group RSP, or is it a defined benefit plan where you put money in, you don't know how much is in the bucket, but they tell you you're going to get this much per month for the rest of your life when you retire? That's a defined benefit. You really want to understand what that is and how it plays in. Now, Adam, you and I were talking about this the other day, and but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there is another source, and it is your house.
Yeah.
Right? You can use your house as a cash flow bucket, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's ways to certainly, I mean, whether you sell your house or not, even if you kept it, there's ways to draw equity or draw cash flow out of your property, which I would argue is a huge source for a lot of people, especially, if you've been in your home for, call it 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, there's no doubt a lot of equity that you can unlock from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's why I just recently started putting the house in there, because before it was just the 3 buckets and now I have a house.
Yeah.
So how does that all play
I thought that was just for me, just to make me feel welcome. That's all.
Trying to make you feel like part of it, right? All the bucket systems. Yeah. So the considerations you want to look at, first of all, if you're going to right size and have excess, this can help supplement your income, right? So again, we were looking at those 3 buckets, and then let's say hypothetically you're looking at it and you think, okay, your mortgage is paid off, you got a house that's completely free and clear, and maybe you don't have enough of that RSP or TFSA, or maybe the money you're getting from your employer isn't enough to kind of give you that total amount of cash flow required to give you the retirement you want. Well, if you're right sized and there's excess from the house, you can use that to help supplement your income. Another consideration too is if there is none, well, if you downsize, maybe you're going from a house that's $500,000 and you trade for another house that's $500,000 and there's no real excess. Well, maybe your cost of living goes down because maybe you don't need to have your driveway snow plowed. Maybe you don't have to spend as much on maintaining that property. The heat, the hydro, the water, whatever those costs are going to go down because now the property is smaller. So there might be some savings there. The third one is what we just touched on, which is the options on putting what's called either a HELOC, home equity line of credit, against your property, or using what's called a reverse mortgage. Now, these 2 things can get kind of tricky. You want to be careful. You want to talk to your agent, your real estate agent, but you also want to talk to your mortgage and bank about this, because obviously when you create debt against your property, it can come back to bite you. And I'll explain why. There's 2 things you want to think about. One is a HELOC is while you're still working, and I know, Adam, you and I talked about this, when you're still working and have higher income, that is the best time to put a line of credit on your property because they're basing it on your current income. Am I correct, Adam?
Yeah, exactly. So they're going to look at your notice of assessment for the last 2 years, and they're going to base on what your notice of assessments look like. And then the lender will say, okay, well, if you make X number of dollars, then great, we'll allow you to get a home equity line of credit for this amount because you can, debt service that much money. And so my parents actually just did this. I mean, they're working later than most. I think they're pushing into their 70s, but they decide, okay, you know what, enough's enough. We're going to retire. And I said, okay, before you retire, we're going into TD Bank. You're going to sit down with them and you're going to get a home equity line of credit in place for the maximum they'll give you. My mom looked at me like I was nuts. She goes, why would I do that? I don't need money right now. I'm like, I get that. I'm like, this costs you $0 to do. And if you don't borrow money off it, it's going to cost you $0 for the rest of your life. I'm like, but if at some point in time you need access to a few $100,000, this will do that for you by a click of a button on a computer.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess it's really the freedom and flexibility to be able to control, the asset itself, right? Yeah. Because once you retire, you're kind of pigeonholing yourself and the opportunities you have with using that property or putting any kind of debt against it, right?
Exactly.
So that's great. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is reverse mortgages. I know there's lots of information, commercials out there about chip reverse mortgages and reverse mortgages in general. Just be aware, typically how those work is the youngest you can be to put one on is 55, and then they look at about 55% maximum amount of debt you can put against a free and clear property. Be aware there's no payments on it. I'm not a specialist on this, so talk to your mortgage agent. But I do know that what happens is that the debt and the interest accumulate over time, and then hypothetically in the future, you don't have to make a payment. But when you sell the house or something happens and the house is sold, then that debt has to be repaid. So just be aware that that is a bit of a snowball. You're not making any payments against it, so that debt is accumulating over time along with the principal that you took. It can be a very slippery slope. So typically I don't recommend clients look at a reverse mortgage, usually until they're in their 70s, because you want to make sure that you're not taking it too long and having it outstanding for too long. Does that make sense, Adam?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, in my opinion, again, this is just very generalized. Reverse mortgage is for someone who wished they had the home equity line of credit set up originally, didn't do it, no longer have the income to qualify for it, and then that's really the only avenue you have left other than selling your property. But
Yeah,
I think best case scenario, keeping fees low, keeping you in complete control as the owner is getting that home equity line of credit set up. And again, it doesn't cost you anything, so there's no downside, in my opinion, to having that set up. Because if you don't use it, zero cost. If you decide to use it, of course, you can consult your financial planner or you can consult your accountant. But why not give yourself the future flexibility should you choose?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, Ben, I think we have a poll for everybody. The question we want to ask everyone who's joining us today is, what is your biggest expense? So I believe Ben put a bunch of options in the poll. We want to see how everyone feels about what their biggest expense is. I don't know. Ben, you there?
Yeah, it is up and running. I'm looking here I can see he's got the poll out there right now.
Oh.
It looks like we have some people starting to submit votes as well.
Okay. I guess as the presenter, we don't get to see the poll.
If you go onto your chat side, Darren, you can see it. Or at least I can.
Yeah, let me just see. If I do this, I'm going to probably... Oh, there we go. Now I see it. Yeah. Kids, house, food, and taxes. All right. How are we doing right now, Ben?
Well, we're just waiting on a few more, and then you should have almost everybody now. Like 10 or 15 seconds, we should be good to go.
I'm gonna submit myself because I always think it's kids.
One person submitted it as a chat, not through the poll, and they said mortgage. So make sure we add that in there.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, house mortgage, yeah, it's in there.
Yeah,
it's one of the options. So that 25. There we go. Oh, there we go. So so more people think it's kids.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's really down about the kids just sucking all the money out.
Give me a second here. All right, so we got the poll there. Let's find out what the I guess we'll call it the truth is. Truth is that taxes actually cost Canadians far more than the necessities. Kind of a scary pie chart right there when you look at it. Now, it is a little bit older because I believe this was taken in 2019 or 2018 from the Fraser Institute. Interestingly enough, though, I always say this whenever I'm doing a retirement or estate planning seminar. I always say to people, the government is exceptionally good at cutting you slightly with taxes. So they don't come in on you with a big hatchet and take money from you and like impale you. They come at you with like a paper, and they paper cut you like a million times and take your taxes away. So they're basically taking your income taxes from the federal, income taxes from the provincial, municipal taxes when you own the house. Then they hit you on gas, food, alcohol, all these other things, right? And they do that on purpose because they don't want to upset the tax base too much by coming at them with these big numbers. So they do it ever so slightly. But the scary thing is when you add it together and look at it, you'll see, if you're actually cognizant of what you're spending on taxes, you'll see how much taxes go out the door. And it's scary. No matter what income bracket you're in, you're pretty much spending about 40% of every dollar you make on some level of taxation. Now, I know Norm's in this presentation. He's watching this presentation right now, so I could probably just almost see his head going up and down like this. So that's a kind of like an aha moment. So what we usually like to do is try to explain to people, kind of like in retirement planning 101, is what is taxable. Okay, so let's start off with the basics. The RIF is taxable, and that is classified as income as you bring it into your bank account from the investment. It's like a pension, self-directed pension. RSPs you save, RIFs you spend. So that's one thing. And there's also a bit of a challenge with RIFs. You need to have a strategy around it. So talk to your financial advisor about it. It's very important you don't leave it too long. Obviously, pensions come in as income as well. They're guaranteed for life, and you get them just like Canada Pension, OAS. Those are pensions. They come in as income. Salary, if you decide to work into retirement and have a side hustle, well, that's great. It's considered salary. And obviously, if you've got other sources of income coming in, that salary that you're making is going to go at the very top. So you're going to pay the highest level of taxes on every dollar you make from that salary. If you have a cottage and you decide to sell the cottage, well, there's capital gains on that cottage. Unfortunately, from the time that you bought it to the time that you sold it, there's going to be a gain on it, and the government wants their piece of the taxes. Rental properties, similar to cottages, the only difference is now not only is the property going up with a capital gains tax potentially, but now you also have rental income coming in. Adam can talk a little bit more about this, but rental income on, if you have a property, the rent that's coming in is classified as income. So that's salary to you comparatively. And then on top of that, when you sell that property, there's going to be a capital gains tax. Adam, anything to add to that?
No, I mean, some things can get more complex. If you own a property within a holding company, then that's going to change the taxation and how it's managed a little bit. But as a generality, yeah, exactly. Any income you have coming through, like whatever's going to be a net positive after expenses, that will be taxed. There are some write-offs that you have. But then certainly when you sell it, you're going to be paying a capital gain based on what you bought it for, what you sold it for. That differential is considered a gain.
Right. And then there's investment returns, right? Because if it's not held in an RSP or a tax-free savings account, those investment returns are taxable, and they are taxed based on the investment that you have. So a lot of people get confused about this, and I usually say interest is taxed as income. So if you have a GIC, everybody loves the 5-6% GICs today. Challenge, if you're holding it outside of an RSP and a TFSA, and it's sitting inside of a non-registered account, you are paying taxes at your marginal rate on any income anything that you earn, interest that you earn on that GIC. You earn $1,000, you're in a 30% marginal tax bracket. You're losing $300. Period. That's the way it works. Capital gains is taxed preferably. And also dividends are taxed preferably too. That's why if you hold those investments in a non-registered account, we recommend either dividends or capital gains over interest-bearing investments because they're taxed much more efficiently. RSPs, people say, well, they're not taxable. Well, they are if you take them out. So lots of times people will be contributing and building up their nest egg for retirement. Problem, RSPs, if you go into it, say to put a pool in your house, which I have had that question before, where somebody asked to take $100,000 out of their RSPs to put a pool in. I had to explain to the person, that they were going to lose more than half the redemption to taxes. So RSPs are taxable if you take them out.
That's a very expensive pool.
That's an expensive pool, right? Like a $200,000 pool, yeah. No, he changed his mind as soon as he realized that there was that much taxes coming in. And it's funny because I always say that it's kind of like when you're working with an advisor, you have a sober second opinion, before you get to do something. So if you're not clicking the mouse, you have somebody that's going, is this what you meant to do? So sale of a business is another biggie in Canada. If you own a business, private business, and it's grown in value, it's incorporated, and then you sell that business, there is a lifetime capital gains exemption where you can actually avoid a lot of taxes. But if that business is worth over a certain amount, usually about $900,000, you will have to pay taxes on the sale of that business. So the way it looks is there's a whole lot that's taxable in Canada. The next one, though, is what is tax-free in Canada? So I always say the list isn't as long, but tax-free, number one, is your house. So every family has an exemption on a principal residence exemption, which means they don't have to pay taxes when you sell it. You do have to declare it, though. The government wants to know these things because they're tracking and watching what you're buying and selling. So you can only claim the one house as your capital gains exemption, or as your principal residence exemption.
An
Second thing
interesting
is,
as a side note, but an interesting like change that they made is, and this is very niche, but flippers were, buying a house, they'd flip it, live in it, primary residence. They live in it for, let's say, 6 months to a year, and then they would sell it, and they would try and do that, historically, and not pay tax.
Right.
Then they put in this year into effect an anti-flipping tax, which basically means if people are living in a property for a short period of time like that, that they're actually the income they generate off of the sale is going to be taxed at a regular income level, not even a capital gain, but regular income.
Regular income.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going on top of everything else they made in that year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, that's interesting because I knew they were making changes to it. I mean, everybody that's, been selling a property probably in the last 5 to 10 years realizes they've had to declare those sales on their tax returns, right? So
yeah, so CRA is looking through all those declarations, seeing, how much money is being made, what's the source, or how it's being done, and then from there they're now, implementing new taxes to try and get people who are more, for the most part, not people who live in their house for 20 years and then sell it once. They're looking at people who are trying to make a business out of living in homes for short periods of time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny that you bring that up because something similar is happening in the world of TFSAs, because some people are using their TFSAs as day trading accounts. And CRA said, yeah, we don't like these like 5,000% returns that you're making in a TFSA, and we consider that a business, so we're going to tax you as income, right? So they're getting pretty sneaky. So. Yeah. The next thing in Canada that's tax-free is lotto. So, hey, you win the lottery here in Canada, unlike the US, you don't have to pay any taxes on it, right? So you win $50 million. First of all, give me a call. And then, we'll obviously you don't have to pay any taxes on it when you get it. Gifts. So this is a biggie in Canada. Well, I usually just say, you can gift as much as you like. You want to record it, right? So obviously, your kids show up to the bank and you have, $50,000 cash that you've given your kids. That's going to raise a lot of red flags. So you want to make sure that everything's documented. You have some kind of a letter that states why that person has that gift. And but through relatives and family, the government is obviously, they understand that there's going to be gift giving throughout your lifetime. TFSAs, I just mentioned that you can, double it, triple it, quadruple it, and there's no taxes on the growth, which is fantastic. Challenge is obviously there's a limit. You can only put 88,000 into the account as of this year. And then finally, life insurance. One of my favorite things to talk about. Adam knows that. Life insurance can be used not only to protect your family in case of loss of life, obviously for your income for your family, but it can also be used as an investment later on in life when you get into retirement and that TFSA gets maxed out and you run out of places to hide your money. Life insurance can actually be used as an investment strategy to avoid taxation in your retirement and for your estate. So great product if it's used appropriately.
And that, all right. I mean, this is a rabbit hole to go down, but like you're talking about the universal style life insurance. Is that what that is?
That's right. Yeah, there is two types. Sorry, I didn't really clarify that. Thanks, Adam. There's two types of life insurance. There is term insurance, which is temporary. You get lots of it for a very small premium, very small amount of money. The second is permanent life insurance. Now, all insurance is non-taxable in Canada if you pay for it with after-tax dollars. But the second type of life insurance is permanent insurance, which is whole life or universal life. And those have a cash component or investment component that's wrapped in life insurance, which is what makes it tax-free. Yeah. Awesome. And those are more expensive, obviously. So I always compare it to renting the house for term, and buying the house is permanent or whole life insurance.
Yeah, I've heard you talk on both of those before, and in my mind they do jumble together a little bit, the whole and the universal. But I know that's an entire other topic.
We'll talk. Any questions? Let me know. Yeah. So let's jump to the estate considerations. So Adam, you and I have talked about this quite a bit, but your home is tax-free if you sell it while you're alive, but you have to declare. It has to be declared for probate on the estate. So you and your spouse pass away, you still own your house free and clear, and then it passes through your estate. There's a probate tax of about 1.5%. Anything over $50,000, by the way. The government got a little, they said, you know what, we're going to give everybody a break. And we're saying anybody who has a small estate under 50,000, they used to charge a probate tax, but they don't anymore, right? And they like to call it a probate fee. They don't say it's a tax, but we all say it's a tax. It's exactly what it is. So anything under 50,000, they don't charge anymore, but they say anything over $50,000 in the estate has to be, you have to pay a 1.5% fee on it to the government to have it pass through the estate. The house obviously would be more than that probably, and probate is not charged on any debt held against the house. So a lot of people think, oh my God, I'm getting probated on my $1 million house. But if you've got a $500,000 mortgage against it, they don't charge you probate on that because it's the mortgage is against the property. It's on the net value of the property. So that's actually a little bonus.
You'd pay the 1.5 on basically the net amount. So in that case, the $500,000 equity you have, that's what you pay the tax on.
That is correct. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. So next thing, think about when you're thinking about estate planning considerations for your house is sometimes people will say, well, let's put someone on on title. Let's put a family member on title. But I always say, okay, that's good, but you want to talk through some of these things because you're trying to avoid that probate tax. But just remember, by adding them, remember what we talked about, principal residence exemption, they don't get it because it's not their house, it's your house. So now if you put them on, if you start too soon, what you could do is cause that capital gains tax we were talking about on rental properties. That's what you're creating for that person who's on title if you live a long life. Now, if you're in your 80s and you do this, that's a different conversation, because if you're 85 and you put your children on title, that's going to be a very short timeline possibly, but it's not going to be 20 years, let's say, right? And that's where some problems can happen, right?
Yeah, so that gain, so that the day you add someone a title, if the house is worth 500,000 on that day, and then by the time you pass away, the house is worth 600,000, and you're going to be paying the gain on that 100.
That's right. Only they will be, though. You as your primary residence won't. They will be paying on their percentage. So if they're, if there's yourself, your wife, and then you put one child on, they will owe capital gains on 33% of the property, right? So that's something to be aware of. Now, so adding an executor, I always say, and when I talk to lawyers that I know, typically an executor is a beneficiary as well. They're a family member. It's very rare to see, a professional executor service in Canada. I mean, it does exist for people who don't have beneficiaries necessarily, but the executor or the beneficiary would be added to the title of the home. And then the benefit, like as you say, Adam, is that the executor has the ability to then, deal with that property and sell it while you're alive. And maybe you're not up to dealing with the estate right now. Maybe there's a cognition issue or there's something that you can't deal with your affairs. The executor can step in and say, okay, let's take care of this while mom and dad are still here, right? And then deal with it.
Yeah, a lot of times, if mom and dad, or if there's just one still that's alive, once they get to a point where maybe the house is too much for them to manage and they want to move into some kind of an assisted living environment, then I find a lot of times the executor or beneficiary would jump in. Usually, it'd be a power of attorney at that point, but they would jump in and they would act on behalf of that individual to help them sell that property, and then from there take that cash and hand it over to someone to invest. Yeah,
and one thing I always like to touch on is just realize when you add someone to the title of the property, you are losing some control. Right? So you add somebody, if you're like, say, 65 and decide to put kids on property, if you decide to refinance that property and put that line of credit Adam was just talking about, you got to get them to sign. And if they don't want to sign, you're not getting the line of credit. So you lose some of the ability to deal with that asset. Just realize that, right? Next thing is, so what's the difference between tenants with right of survivorship and tenants in common when you own a property? I threw this in there actually this morning because we were talking about it, and there's two different ways to own a property. Tenants with right of survivorship is like a husband and wife. One person passes away, the other person inherits it 100%, right? You have three people who own a property like we just talked about. There's mom, dad, and a child, and an adult child, and they own the property together. Technically, according to CRA, they each own 33%. Mom and dad get their principal residence exemption. The 33% that Johnny has, or Jane, that is taxable in their hands, right? Now, if mom or dad passes away, now little Jane or Johnny and the surviving spouse now own 50%. That's how it rolls. Right of survivorship means you survive and you get the rights of the person who passed. Tenants in common is when Adam and I decide to go buy a property together. We're buying a rental. Him and I own 50% each. I die, Adam doesn't get my 50%, my estate does. Okay, so there's a difference between that when you're doing title. Any comments, Adam?
No, that's exactly. I was going to say I was going to give the example about buying a rental property. No, that's perfect.
Yeah. Sometimes what'll happen too is because I've heard rumors, like people will come to me and say, well, what happens if I put my kids on as 1%? And I'm like, well, you can't. You can't, because then it would be tenants in common. And if you did that, then that 1% would be flowing to your child's estate, and anything that mom and dad are doing is flowing to their estate. So like it's not, you've got to be careful you don't commingle the terminology.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then the last thing on here is the option to sell, rent, live off the proceeds, no probate. So here's some of the benefits of if you do sell the property and in your estate and you no longer have that property anymore, you can go rent. Renting is great because now you've got no costs of maintenance on that property. You got no probate because you don't own the property. But now you have this investment that could give you some pretty decent returns. Maybe not. It's more, depending on how you invest it, will be more than what a piece of real estate would do. Don't know, but it will definitely give you a good return, and that will most likely give you enough money to pay the rent. So I know, Adam, you and I were talking about that, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of clients. I think, in a slide coming up later, we'll touch on it a bit too, but we have a lot of clients now that are looking at downsizing, and we tell them, like, listen, this is a huge change. Think of this as a test drive. Go rent something in a neighborhood you think is going to fit your lifestyle. Rent for a year or 2 or 3. As you're doing that, invest the equity from your house and allow that equity to kick out money to you that's going to basically offset or pay your rent as you live there. So really, you're living off the interest you're generating from that equity. You're not even touching that principal, ideally.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And again, typically those types of investments are non-registered, so they are taxable. Remember, I was talking about interest, dividends, and capital gains. Understanding those things is very important when you're investing to make sure you're minimizing the taxes on that. And then obviously, if it's a non-registered account, you can't put a beneficiary on it. So again, we come back to that conversation about adding someone on the account so that they have right of survivorship of the account in case you pass away, which is another estate planning tip. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Adam now, and we're going to start talking a little bit about team. Him and I are huge believers in team, obviously. Myself as a financial advisor and the team here at O'Farrell's, we talk quite regularly with accountants and lawyers, and we like to be part of the conversation so we know the strategies and solutions that we're implementing for clients aren't going to blow up on them because we didn't know something from another professional. So again, Adam is part of that list of professionals. Real estate and realtors is a huge part of clients' lives, as is mortgage brokers who help with the financing on it. So Adam, take it away.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when we're working with clients, one of the first things we do is when we're sitting down, especially with people who are downsizing, we look at them and say, okay, who are you working with right now? Who's your financial advisor? Who's your lawyer? Who's your mortgage broker? Because all of those pieces need, in my opinion, to really sync together to make this a smooth process and one where you don't misstep along the way. Because there are a lot of things that you can action in a sequence that will minimize any kind of taxes, that'll set you up, again, for that smoother or better retirement. So we certainly try and get that team, or I try and get the list of people, and then introduce myself to them and say, listen, I'm the realtor working with so-and-so. I want to just chat with you and try and get everyone, if we can, on a Google Meet, on a Zoom, on a Microsoft Teams, and just get everyone to speak for 5 or 10 minutes so that the entire team is really engaged and understands what the client is trying to achieve. So to me, that's paramount, is get everyone together. It doesn't have to be long. And now with virtual technology, it's very easy to do for these people to carve out 5 or 10 minutes. And then from there, at least everyone's working in the same direction.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, let's take it to your next slide.
So looking to right size in the near future. So what we're trying to really impress upon you here is that this is something that you should start, 1.5, 2 years in advance. This is not something that, you're coming out of winter, it's getting to spring, you start to see flowers and go, oh, I'd love to move and downsize now. I mean, you can do that, but I would argue that to do this, to get the team together and to action things in a sequence that makes sense, and that's going to put you in the best possible position later, it's not a knee-jerk thing. It's something that you want to put a lot of thought into. You want to come out with a good system, and then you want to roll that process forward. And that's where, I mean, talking to, to someone like Darren and myself, and then again, your accountant, your lawyer, your mortgage broker, or your bank, is really what you need to do, and you want to have time to do that in an effective manner. In terms of on the next slide, the benefits of right sizing. So, I mean, there's 5 benefits that we've outlined here. The first one there is location. So you want to make sure you find a location that you're going to live in that's going to really suit and going to fit your lifestyle. At the end of the day, once your kids are out of the house, you're living in this large home with a giant yard, maybe has a pool and a hot tub and all those fun things. I mean, is that the life you want now, or was that the life you wanted when you bought that house and you had the kids and the dog running in the backyard? So that's a question to ask yourself. Certainly if you do right size, travel becomes a new world of opportunity, because again, leaving that big house with that yard and the pool and the hot tub, it's harder to leave than, let's say, a condo would be. You can't just lock the door and walk away and hope everything's going to work out. So again, it really does unlock some more freedom that way for you. It drops your costs, no doubt, in terms of running a smaller property. There's going to be lower gas, water, hydro costs, and then just overall maintenance as well will be quite a bit less. Time, that was one of the things I mentioned at the beginning of this, was the 2 things right sizing unlocks for you is it's going to unlock equity or money, and it's going to unlock time. So you're going to recapture that. You're going to spend a lot less time taking care of your property, which is, I think, a great thing. I know right now, getting into fall, I'm looking at the backyard saying, oh my God, I got to close our pool. I've got to trim back the gardens. Our hedges are growing out of control. I'm shaking my head, and I'm like, when am I going to do this?
I'm already making my list.
Oh, it's terrible. There's so, I have a list too, and I'm like, oh God, I have like 3 or 4 weekends of just like pure work in the backyard right now, just to get things ready for snow. Yeah. So, yeah. And I'm young enough, able-bodied enough to do it. But, fast forward 20 years or so from now, for me, I can promise you, I don't want to be doing that stuff. Like I already know that now. And then the last thing is the purging. I mean, and that's I would say it's kind of a freeing thing to start getting rid of stuff that you might have been holding on to for 15 or 20 years that really you don't need anymore in your house. On the next slide there, I mean, this sounds funny, but the more people I meet with, the more people I talk to, I recognize that the partners in a relationship, typically speaking, are not on the same page when we first meet. And that's why that 18 to 24 month time horizon makes a lot of sense, because there's a few nights of glasses of wine that you need to really sit down with each other and chat through what does the future look like for us. And some of the questions you want to ask yourself would be, is traveling a goal of yours? Is that something that you want to do? And if you do, how long do you want to be away? How are you going to manage the cash flow or the finances on it? And then another important one is, who's taking care of your place? So who's going to look after your home, as you're gone? Maybe you're gone for 3 months. How is that going to really work for you? So there's some things there as couples to sit down together and really hammer through and get a better understanding of what the big picture is going to look like for you.
Next slide.
Yep.
I was a little delayed there.
That's okay. And so in terms of challenges, so there's 5 challenges that we've outlined here in terms of right sizing. One of the first ones is the emotional attachment. I was actually a past client of mine who did sell and downsize into an absolutely gorgeous new home. I was at her daughter's engagement party that they had at their home. It was the last thing they were going to do at their home before it closed and they moved into the new one. And she was giving a speech in front of this entire group of people, and I was lucky enough to be there. And to hear her speak and then see her eyes well up with tears as she was talking about how that home has been so good to them and their family, and all the memories that they shared, it was incredible. And it really, that hit me like a hammer. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like, there really is a super, super strong emotional attachment you have once you're at that point of looking to right size. And that made it for me crystal clear that, again, you need time. The 18 to 24 months, this is why. To get yourself into the state of being ready to let go is big. Second one there, again, people being on the same page. I keep saying it, but it is important to make sure that you and your partner are in sync with each other. Yeah. Third thing there.
Adam, just to jump in there, I'm surprised how often that's the case, because I broach this conversation sometimes with clients, and I'll say, so, what does the lifestyle look like? And then, it surprises me how often one person will say condo downtown, and then the other person will say, like, it's like small house in the country.
Yeah.
And it's like they both look at each other like, I didn't know that you wanted to be living downtown. And and it's just it's pretty wild to see the conversation. It's almost like a spark there, because they both feel they know the other person and what they want.
Yeah.
And then I ask the question, and then they're both like on their opposite sides, right? So
yeah, that's
pretty wild.
that one there is an example that we hear all the time, and there's always a condo, and there's always someone who goes, well, I still want a yard. It's like, okay, well, you don't get a yard in a condo, so we're gonna have to work through this a little bit together. Third one is yours, Darren. So I mean, when you're looking at right sizing, it's what's the financial plan, and when does it make sense to sequence? If you have investments, I've heard you talk about this. If you have certain types of investments, you want to sequence selling off certain things at different times. Again, just to make sure from a tax perspective, you're lining things up in an appropriate way.
Yeah.
Fourth, like we talked about, is putting that team together, and then the fifth is finding the right place. Like where is the right spot? Is it the condo, or is it that house in the country? What's the right spot to land in?
Maybe it's a different city, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are moving to the East Coast. That's a huge thing. I had clients a few years ago that actually moved. They sold their big house here in Kemptville, and I was surprised they moved to downtown Toronto, condo in downtown Toronto. And a lot of people I tell that story to, they think, why would
That's a real
but they love it. They love the energy in the downtown core of Toronto, and every time I check in with them, they just seem to be living like a bunch of kids, right? So
jeez, that's wild. That's somewhere. I mean, I nothing against Toronto for anyone who's maybe watching this from Toronto, but I would not move there. To me, it's too busy.
It is.
Okay, so how you get started. So the first thing from a real estate perspective is the listing process. So a big piece of the puzzle to unlock for anyone that's looking at creating a financial plan and looking at right sizing is finding, or determining what's your property worth in today's market. Because once you have a conservative number on that, you can then go to someone like Darren, sit down with them and say, okay, my realtor tells me my property is worth $1 million. What does that do for my future, right? And then you can start running that through the financial machine to figure out, how that's going to line up. A decluttering plan for the listing process is huge. Hiring the right help is another big one that we as realtors should bring to the table. And what I mean by hiring the right help is a lot of properties need some maintenance. That might mean an electrician, it might mean a plumber, a landscaper, a roofer, a window person. There's 1,000 different things that your property may or may not need to help maximize your return on investment. And that's stuff that we help advise you on what to do. And then if you need help finding the right people, we can give you a host of people that we use all the time that can action those items for you. From that, staging is one of the things, probably one of the last things that you're going to want to do is have a stager or a designer come through and meet with you just to help go through a plan of decluttering and making sure that your property is going to, as buyers walk through it, it's going to feel good. You want to make sure you have the proper flow as you walk through your property.
Oh, hang on. Let me back up.
Okay.
There we go.
I just saw and noticed that we had 5 minutes left in the meeting. I don't know if that's...
I think we can go over, but we're getting close to the end anyways, so it's all good. Keep going.
All right, sounds good. And then the last one would be, for some people, I find, the idea of living in a house while it's on market is hugely uncomfortable. So we've had a lot of clients in the past saying, like, you know what, you wanted to travel at some point, you wanted to rent a cottage, go on vacation, go enjoy yourself, leave us with the keys, we'll sell your property. All the paperwork that we do can be done electronically. And now we don't have to live through the turmoil of having people coming in at your house constantly. So that seems to be a pretty low stress way to go about it.
Nice.
So 4 mistakes we see quite often, and really these things come down to it's really money. So people forget about the closing costs when you're buying a property, what the closing costs are that you're going to incur, land transfer tax being one of the big ones, legal fees as well. Some people overestimate or have an inflated value. They might see the house across the street sold for 1.2 million, and they go, oh, mine must be worth that. but they didn't recognize that that house has $300,000 of improvements over and above theirs, right? So if you're running your financial projections for your future on a number that's fictitious, then you're setting yourself up for failure before you even start.
Yeah, that's a big one. And especially since last year, you know, when prices got crazy, markets are starting to settle down a little bit. People had some pretty audacious beliefs on what their properties were worth, you know, and it's great, but can you get that? And how long do you want to leave it on the market before you sell it? Like, do you really want to put yourself in that pigeonhole, right?
100%. Yeah. So it's really, when I give people numbers, especially when it's for the downsizing purpose, I say, you know, here's more than likely what you're gonna see, but let's go down a notch and say, here's a highly conservative number. Let's run with that to set yourself up for your future. And then if we outperform that when we sell, great. That's just gravy.
Great.
On the buying side, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, we sit down with people and we'll talk to them about their needs and wants. So what they're looking for in their next property. And again, we're looking not just for surface level detail. We're trying to dive a little bit deeper so we can really get to understand what that lifestyle vision is going to look like. We chat with people about their budget. And again, the third point there is that the lifestyle goals. So again, we're really trying to get below surface with people and really understand what they want today in 5 and 10 years to make sure that whatever we're going to help put them is going to really suit them for the long term. And then the fourth one there on a legal side is just, you know, updating your will, your power of attorney, just to make sure that that stuff is in check, because as you're moving, these are things you should chat with your lawyer about. Again, it comes back to that team, chat with them to make sure that everyone is in sync.
Yeah, that's a great one about the will too. I find, you know, I'm amazed sometimes when I'm talking to clients. I ask almost every meeting, you know, if I haven't recorded it, I'll ask, when's the last time you updated your will and your power of attorney? And I'm amazed. Like, sometimes people will be like, oh, it's been like 15 years, can't remember, you know, and I'll be a bit of like a dog on a bone. I'll be like, every time they meet, I'll bug them. I'm like, did you do it? Did you do it? And I think it's because I've seen enough estates or people pass away or need a power of attorney and hit that legal wall where they don't have it, and it literally blows up on them. Like, I mean, you know, technically you can't even talk about your partner's assets without a power of attorney financial. You can't make health and medical decisions for your partner if you don't have a medical power of attorney. You know, so these things are so important, and they take so little time to do. Yet sometimes people get a little bit backed up about, you know, wanting to think about it or do it. But it can make a world of difference in having someone who's going to take care of you, or you take care of them, and the headaches that you have to face, right? So
yeah, I think for me, like the idea would be whenever there's a big milestone in life, you know, so when your kids are young, that's a big milestone. You know, your kids go off to university or start careers, another big milestone. At that point in time, looking at your will and how that's set up, it's like, it's a good idea on each big milestone in life. Just make sure it's still, you know, it still makes sense for where you are today.
Every 5 to 10 years, I always say, is a great time. Let's see here.
Fun fact for boomers. This is a poll that we can do. So Ben, I don't know if you want to set this up, but the question here is, have you lived in your home since your kids were young? So I'm curious to see how many people would fit into that bucket.
I'm voting on it.
Let's see what we got here for responses.
Yeah, how many responses we got? Oh, starting to go. Yes. Couple yes, couple no's. About the 60-40. Okay.
Interesting.
Oh, we got a few more.
We're leveling out.
50-50 now. All right. You want to shut it down?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
That's 50-50. We thought it was going to be a little bit higher, but give me a second. There you go. Okay.
So for those of you who have lived in your house since your kids were young, congratulations. You're sitting on upwards of 600% of what you paid for your house. So, I mean, that graphic pretty much says it all. You do have a lot of money or a lot of equity in your property right now that you can unlock. Again, you can look at it from, you don't need to sell your house to unlock it. You can set up that home equity line of credit and have that available to you if you want to in the future. But certainly if you do sell your property, there will be a significant amount of money that at this point in time is tax-free as your principal residence that you get to benefit from. So the last one here, it's funny, I've done this type of a slide a bunch of times, and once it was in a room that was full of realtors, and they all put their, well, not all, but a lot of them looked at me like I was crazy, and they said, why are you talking about or trying to convince someone to rent a house? I'm like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you don't really get paid if they rent a house. You get paid if they buy one. I'm like, okay, that's fair. I see that. I'm like, but at the end of the day, think about what this group of people is looking to do. They're selling their asset, and then from there they're test driving or trying out this new lifestyle, and they don't really know what that's going to necessarily look and feel like until they try it. So why would we try and push them to go and buy a house and say, hope it works. If it doesn't, call me, I'll sell it for you in a couple of years. You know, that seems like the wrong advice for them. You know, it might benefit my bank account, but it's not helping them achieve what they're looking to do. So a lot of times I encourage people to say, listen, try it out, rent, and especially in an environment today where, you know, rates that you can get on investments are so high, why not invest your money with someone like Darren, have the interest you get offset your rent costs, and more or less you're doing this test drive for free.
Yeah, I mentioned that quite often. It comes in conversation for the 80+ clients where they're trying to let go of that property. They need some money to offset some of the long-term care costs or retirement living costs, and they almost discount their house and think, well, that's just an asset I can never touch. And I say, but when you sell it and you're living off the proceeds of it, if you earn a steady return of 5 or 6%, GICs are giving that right now. You know, that on $1 million house, like, geez, that's $50,000 on $1 million property. And, you know, like, that's a lot of rent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Right?
if you're paying $3,000 a month in rent, that's $36,000 plus utilities. Again, in that example you gave, I mean, you're now living for free.
Yeah.
Off that interest, and your $1 million of equity, that principal is still just sitting there in a bank account. You haven't even touched it.
Now there's taxes on the growth.
Yeah.
But you know, with proper planning, you can minimize that. So anyways. All right.
So yeah, the closing remarks on the next slide there. At the end of the day, everyone's situation is unique, and that's why a cookie cutter, you know, here's the playbook, here's what you have to do, isn't going to work for everyone. It's about getting together that group of people, of professionals, and getting them all together in a room or in a virtual room to discuss your situation, and then coming up with a plan that you can roll out together.
Yeah, great. And then obviously, if they need a strategy for their real estate, they contact you. And obviously, if they want some advice on cash flow and estate planning and taxation, they can give me a call. Or any of the team here at O'Farrell Financial. We'd be happy to discuss those types of strategies. Okay, we're going to get to the questions now. Two things we have on the screen. I know we get asked this question quite a bit, is how do we get a hold of you? You can see there on your screen, there's these QR code things. If people watching right now take their phones out and put their camera on, you can literally put your camera up on that QR code, each one of them, and it will take you to the website to get in touch with either myself or Adam. So if you have direct questions that you don't want to share right now with the group, you have some, you know, want to be private about it, then I would recommend take your camera out on your phone, put it up against these QR codes, and then book something in either to contact Adam or myself, and we'd be happy to answer those questions. If you have general questions right now and you want to put your hand up, we're going to let Ben field any questions for you, and then we'll try to answer them. We are within a little bit over an hour. We started at about 32, and we are now at 36. So we've taken an hour of everyone's time, so we want to be cognizant of that. If you have to leave, by all means, this will be a recording at a later date. So, Ben, do we have any questions?
I don't see any questions right now.
Okay. Well, that's understandable. We were pretty thorough, Adam. And you know what? We appreciate everybody sticking around to the end. And for the ones that didn't, don't worry. Ben's going to send out an email with a link to a recording of this presentation at a later date. And if you want to share that with friends and family, you can do that. We appreciate you spending time with us today. Adam, any closing remarks?
No, that was great. I think overall we probably hit on a lot of the hot topics there, and And yeah, like we said, if people want to, just start, and again, they could be 3, 5, 10 years out from now. For me, it's not a waste of time if you want to reach out to me and say, you know what, in 5 to 10 years, I'm looking at retiring, want to get a sense on, what I should be doing with my home between now and then. I have those conversations all the time, and I'd be very happy to walk you through, what maintenance items or updates or upgrades you can consider doing, again, to create a good return on investment and set yourselves up for, the best possible sale price at that point in time.
Great advice, Adam. I'm going to need some of your help actually working on my wife, because my wife thinks we're going to stay in our house forever and she's going to get buried in the backyard. I told her that's not going to happen. And so I'm going to need somebody on my side trying to convince her that we have to downsize.
Sounds like a you problem, not a me problem.
Awesome. All right, Ben, if there's nothing else from you, then we're going to shut her down.
It looks all clear. I will close it down right now.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.